In 2021, I picked up a rosary for the first time in my life. I had been on an expedition into the Catholic faith with innumerable questions and at time apprehension, and one of the last things on this journey that I was able to grasp was Marian doctrine. Although I had been baptized a Roman Catholic in my infancy, I was raised a Baptist, and had only ever heard that Mary had no place in the life of a Christian and had no importance. In a sense, I was motherless. Although I have my own mother, who was a lovely woman and a great role model, we were both never taught the Catholic faith. She was raised a Catholic, but like so many, left the Catholic Church because she had never been taught the faith. Since I was raised a Baptist, I was raised in a counter-religion, so to speak. In Protestantism, I was motherless. I always wondered why there was a father and a son, but deliberated about how come we had no mother. In 2021, God sent me so many graces to come to slowly understand the Catholic faith. And in autumn of 2021, I picked up a rosary for the first time. I had been in a conversation with a Catholic podcaster, and he had invited me onto his podcast. I told him privately I'd been attending the New Order Mass, but was so confused, and was confused about Mary. He said these simple words to me, and they confounded me. He said, "Mary brought Jesus into the world. She housed salvation." These few words made me revere Mary so much more, and I felt such awe. I got on my knees and attempted to learn how to say the rosary. The first handful of times I tried, I did so incorrectly, but I still made the effort. As I got into my knees, I said, "Lord, you know how badly I want to know the truth and how scared I am to be deceived or offend you, and I'm just going to say these prayers to your mother, and if this is wrong or idolatry, convict me, and I'll tell the world." Well, he did convict me. As I began to pray the rosary, I basically became convicted that this prayer was going to change my life. And it did, and it continues to. It was not by Marian doctrine that I began to understand who the Blessed Mother was. It was by praying the rosary and meditating on the mysteries that opened my eyes to the truth of the Blessed Virgin, the life of a Christian on the narrow path, and so many other things. About a month later, I consecrated myself for the first time to the Blessed Virgin Mary. In the mystery of the Rosary and in the Gospel where Mary finds out her cousin St. Elizabeth is pregnant, Mary races to St. Elizabeth to help her in her charity as fast as possible. This is what Mary does to us and for us, and has done for me. Right after I did my Marian consecration, I began to feel very convicted that Mary was calling me to a deeper level of imitating her and imitating Christ. St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 11:1, "Imitate me, for I imitate Christ." I began to see why we have the saints and Our Lady as role models. I suddenly experienced the conviction of taking my nose piercing out, and I never looked back. I threw out half my wardrobe and was left with a couple of items in my closet that I could wear to Mass. In 2022, I began to try to stop wearing pants. It was really hard for me, and I wavered a lot, especially in the summer, but by fall of 2022, that's when I began to grow much more steady. And in 2023, the game was changed. One thing about pants that I began to come to understand was how, although many virtuous women wear pants, pants don't do justice to the sacredness of a woman, and because of this, society does not see women how we should be seen. In fact, society has no respect for women and doesn't see women as they are. Part of the reason for this is because people do not know how to relate to beauty anymore, and there is a loss of beauty. There is a loss of beauty and sacredness in our society. We see this loss of sacredness when people talk in the sanctuary at church, do not genuflect, do not receive our Lord as they should. We see it in the way churches are no longer built beautifully, but are modernized. We see it in modern architecture in general. Beauty and sacredness are terms that have lost their meaning among society. Beauty has been replaced with sensuality and sexiness. Sacredness has been replaced with feelings. Beauty was always meant to draw our minds and hearts, and the minds and hearts of others to God, but now the creature has replaced the Creator. Women wearing pants reflects this loss of beauty in society. Denim historically were a man's work clothes. They were not a fashion statement. During the women's rights movement, pants actually became a symbol of rebellion and of equality. Well, if a woman losing her identity is marked as equality, I don't want it. Saint Catherine of Siena once stated, "Be who God created you to be, and you will set the world on fire." God created men and women differently, and women wearing pants were only the beginning of the gender dysphoria crisis we see happening in our society today, and the blurring of genders and their roles. This goes back to the feminist revolution. Our Lady of Fatima told Sister Lucia that the final battle between God and the devil would be an attack against marriage and the family. The feminist revolt goes back to Eden, when Eve chose to serve the devil and eat of the forbidden fruit. The feminist revolt was a revolt against God and his perfect designs, and that same design is meant to keep civilization in order and from falling apart. Because things are so out of order, our society is collapsing. The family unit is the backbone and foundation of our society, and the Catholic Church is the pillar and foundation of truth. This is also why, as Catholics, we have to pray for the grace to stop flirting with the world and its deceptions, which is so hard. It's like we have one foot on the narrow path and one in the world, which is something I myself struggle with so much. Sister Lucia said, "From now on, we are either with God or the devil. There is no middle ground." We must be decidedly feminine. My friend Emily, who runs the Poor in Spirit account, first spoke these words to me. Decidedly feminine. The way we dress says so much. It speaks on our behalf before we ever even open our mouths. Unfortunately, most women do not realize this, or understand how modern fashion was crafted against us. It's not easy to change our habits and tastes, but with prayer and grace, we can do it. We will have learning curves, and it may take time, but we don't need perfection to start. We just need the will to want to regain our society and bring back the beauty. God will supply the graces, and our learning curves may help others in the long term. I don't pretend to have it perfectly figured out, but I do have the conviction that God will complete the good work He began. We can start small. We can begin by veiling at Mass, which should be done anyway. We can veil ourselves at Mass. This is an easy thing to do. If it's hard for us, it's because we lack humility. We have to examine ourselves. Another easy thing to do is, and it's a quick solution, is to give up things like showing cleavage and shorts. We can throw out our jeans, or we can burn them. If we don't care to do these things mentioned, we can start with no longer showing cleavage, which is a mortal sin. There are so many easy things to start with, though, and if we can't try them all, then we should start with one and be diligent in following through with it. When we realize that our way of dress can either please or displease God, we can start with these small changes. Getting rid of jeans and eventually pants altogether is hard. I really struggled with it, and as I said, I experienced waves, but over time, God has really supplied the grace. Also, dressing feminine changes the way men treat you. Because women, especially in the workplace now, do the same work as men and dress the same as men, men no longer see them as a jewel of precious worth, but as machines, sometimes equals by effeminate men, and as objects. Remind them that you are not an object, you are a woman. The way we dress, carry ourselves, and speak teaches men how to treat women. This is why Archbishop Sheen said, "The level of any civilization is the level of its womanhood, because when a man loves a woman, he has to be worthy of her. The higher she is in virtue, nobility of character, truth, justice, and goodness, the more a man has to aspire to be worthy of her." Our fashion choices reflect our character, and modesty in general reveals the hidden. It also reveals hidden vice, like vanity, need for excessive attention, lust, sensuality. You get it. We shouldn't cheapen ourselves. Also, the way we dress can help us along the path of virtue and others. It can be very hard to change the way we dress. I hated everything I wore at first, like skirts or dresses, and thought all of it was hideous. I hated everything I wore at first with the skirts, sometimes like dresses with leggings or just dresses in general. But over time, as I changed inside, I became more accepting of it, and now I can never see myself going back to the way I used to dress because I actually find it repulsive. The outside helps change the inside, and the inside actually helps change the outside, and it's full circle. Also, we owe it to our children to teach them about beauty and how to relate to it and set an example. Lack of beauty leads to lack of God in society. Just like post-Vatican II churches were gutted to downplay their Catholic character, this is what we do to ourselves as Catholics when we dress without dignity or without thinking about how our wardrobe choices will affect others. Our wardrobes can even lead people to sin, depending on what they reveal on their appropriateness. If we lead someone to sin with their eyes, we can be liable for it. And again, the goal is to grow over time in the way we see things. Everyone in our society is dressed like they, them, essentially. Women are wearing men's clothes and men are wearing women's clothes. Don't be like they, them. Be a woman or be a man. So many long for the way things used to be and hate our ugly society, but think little of how fashion has contributed to this. Our Lady of Fatima warned against certain fashions that came about in the 20th century and said it would lead many souls to hell. The church has no fashions. We know nothing different than how we've been raised, so it can take time to really grasp things, and God works with us over time and in sometimes baby steps. We may make mistakes, but on the narrow path, we must still continue to put one foot in front of the other. If we want to combat the devil, the world, and its modern errors, we must return to tradition. Even if we only find the courage to take baby steps, the Immaculate Heart of Mary will be our refuge and our star guiding us along the voyage of the sea. She, after all, is the star of the sea. If only we as women knew that modern fashion was one of the greatest traps and snares of the devil of our time, we would do everything to amend this and regain our dignity and grace. We get angry when we see trans people walking around appropriating a gender they'll never be, and yet we don't embrace our own identity. We get lost in the confusion. It's time for Catholics to regain their footing and fight back. In a world where chaos reigns, the spirit of a woman who knows who she is a quiet weapon of force against error. Matthew 5:13-16 says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all of the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." This is what we are called to do. Just like the Sacred Heart of Jesus is a burning and glowing furnace of charity, the Immaculate Heart of Mary is overflowing with grace to pour out on us. She is our mother, after all. Jesus gave her to us as he was crucified at Calvary for us. He said these words to his mother and to St. John, "Mother, behold your son. Son, behold your mother." We are not motherless. Mary is the prototype of femininity, and she will give us the grace to grow in these areas so long as we ask. We have a loving mother who will take us by the hand and show us what beauty really is, and if we fix our eyes on her Immaculate Heart, we will be victorious in this pursuit. I highly recommend doing the Consecration to Mary by St. Louis de Montfort, and I will actually attach it in the link below, and I do recommend renewing it once a year. Mary gets to work fast on conforming us to the image of Jesus. I also recommend devotion to the Brown Scapular, the Seven Sorrows devotion, and the Consecration to the Sacred Heart. The Consecration to Mary ultimately leads to all these things, and no child of Mary's is ever lost. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind." Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind." If our minds and hearts are being made new, it only seems right that what's going on inside will change the outside. If we're sick and struggling with illness, it usually manifests on the outside as a sign that we're fighting disease inside. This is the same concept with what we wear. It reveals what's going on inside and in our hearts. The best medicine against this are the sacraments, chiefly the Sacred Heart in the Eucharist, where we say, "Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word, and my soul shall be healed." If we frequent the sacraments and we consecrate ourselves to Mary, it will make a world of difference, and it will be a blessing to us and so many others. Pax Christi. If you liked this video, please consider becoming a patron and subscribing to us on YouTube as well. Immaculate Heart of Mary, pray for us.